Tonight on Primetime Politics, assessing the leaders' debate.
Mr. Kearney, Mr. Kearney, hang on. Last word to Mr. Kearney in this segment, please.
Thank you very much.
The English language debate gives leaders a chance to push each other on the issues. Coming up, we will examine what was said and how the words expressed might be used in the last week of the federal campaign. And the Debate Commission comes under fire for granting a right-wing group Presse accreditation and for the chaos that ensued. The Ottawa Bureau Chiefs will fill us in. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, I'm Michael Serapio. Well, as many of you saw on CPAC yesterday, the only English language debate of this 45th general election campaign did take place last night. The leaders of four major parties going head-to-head on issues of trade, resource and energy development, leadership and tariffs. And given the Liberal leader standing in the polls, well, he received a lot of the attacks. Here is a sampling of what took place last night.
I know you want to be running against Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau isn't here.
Are you denying you were his economic advisor?
I did not provide any of that advice. We are literally talking about hundreds of thousands, not jobs, but careers in the trade. And that's why we're investing in apprenticeships and mid-career.
But I think people are worried, Mr. Carney, if New Democrats aren't there to force Liberals to make sure they remember about people they will forget.
I followed all the rules well in advance.
Let's reveal your assets like we all did.
And working for the people of Canada.
What do you own? Why don't you tell Canadians and Quebecers what you own?
Now, as to who won last night's debate, opinion has been mixed, but overall, just about every pundit agrees there was no knockout punch. Still, Abacus data did get some early reaction from Canadians, and here's what they found. As to which leader did more to win your vote, 43% of respondents said Pierre Poilievre, 40% said Mark Carney, 11% Jagmeet Singh, and 2% Yves-François Blanchet. And in terms of overall impressions, here's what Abacus found, beginning with Mark Carney, who walked away with a 59% positive impression rating. 22% were left with a negative impression, and that gives the Liberal leader a plus 37 net impression. For Pierre Poilievre, as you see, respondents gave him 53% positive, 30% negative, an overall net plus 23. Mr. Singh, 41% positive, 24% negative, overall a plus 6 assessment. And for Monsieur Blanchet, 25% positive, 31% negative, giving the Bloc leader a minus 6 net tally. Okay, so that is Abacus data. And for their take on the debate last night, we're now joined by our campaign strategist. Michele Cadario is the CEO of Vanguard Strategy, a former national campaign director for the Liberals. Jordan Paquet, vice president at Blue Sky Strategy Group, was deputy campaign manager for the PEI-PC party in the last provincial campaign. And George Soule, former director of communications for the NDP. Hello to all three of you.
Hi. Hello.
So listen, we're going to get to the two, I guess, overall impressions of the debate. But I want to begin with the individual leaders right now, because obviously they're trying to sell themselves to Canadians in two of the cases as the next prime minister, and another as to we need to have members in parliament. So let's begin with Mark Carney here. Take a listen to what we heard from the Liberal leader last night, as he was answering a question, or at least rebutting a point made by Yves-François Blanchet regarding pipelines. Take a listen.
I think people should be kept very informed about climate change, because we are in a very strange denial situation about climate change, which still exists and is very expensive. And I'm sorry to crash your party, guys, but you are telling fairy tales. Clean oil and gas is a fairy tale. Large-scale carbon sequestration, sorry, I'm French, is a fairy tale. It does not exist.
When I was born and when I was growing up in Edmonton, early days, it was a fairy tale, quote unquote. But you know what happened? Canadian ingenuity, Canadian engineers, Canadian governments, both the federal government and the Alberta government got together and converted this.
The worst pollution in the world.
If I may,
the worst pollution.
May I finish? May I finish? May I finish?
10 more seconds to finish, please. Let him finish his point.
That's the opportunity we have. That's the opportunity we have in carbon capture. That's the opportunity we have in small modular reactors. That's the opportunity we have in hydrogen and beyond. This country can be a clean energy superpower. My government will help deliver it.
Okay, so obviously Mark Carney is trying to win his first general election, and there you have him answering Yves-François Blanchet. One of many points where he was being taken on by the different party leaders. Michele, what do you make of the Liberal leader's performance last night?
I was impressed. You know, no surprise, I'm a Liberal, but he did what he had to do. He was really calm on stage for it being his first kind of platform like that, when everybody was coming at him. And he demonstrated what Canadians seem to like about him. He is a boring economist who really knows the economy and who really knows how to get it functioning, and what we need to do as a country, as he says, to catalyze ourselves and to be less dependent on the United States. When he talks, sure, it's not the most riveting, but boy, it's substantial and it gives depth. And I think that's what he needed to do, and that's what he needed to convey. So I say, job well done.
Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, he kind of skated along, but I mean, he's still on, as we just saw from the clip here, on some of these energy type policies, he has still been talking out of both sides of his mouth. So I would expect the Conservatives and perhaps the NDP to also exploit this going forward. I mean, he still won't commit to repealing Bill C-69. Came up at the debate last night. He wouldn't bite on it. And he says one thing in Alberta and says something different in Quebec. So, yeah, I mean, he didn't have a disastrous night. I mean, he kind of skated through most of it, ran, kind of a typical front-runner thing. But yeah, I would expect to see some of these clips really be exploited over the next few days with the other parties.
George?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I think all the leaders did what they had to do. You know, I would argue that Jagmeet did a little more than that. But, I think as we saw in David's numbers, I think by and large, people just kind of saw what they wanted to see out of their leaders, which means none of them failed. And so we'll see in the next few days if that changes. What I will say to the boring part, I think, again, this morning, Mark Carney was asked what makes him different than Justin Trudeau. He chose to talk about how he scrapped or brought back, I guess, the big tax giveaway to the richest Canadians that Justin Trudeau had canceled. But I think what he probably should have said was, you should have seen my debate last night. I'm not the drama teacher. I am a boring economist.
Okay, and David, by the way, David Coletto behind Abacus Data, just to go by first name. But it's interesting you bring up that point, because I do want to also talk about Pierre Poilievre and his performance, because the clip I'm going to play here is where he tried to tie Mark Carney to the last 9 years of Liberal government. Take a listen to what we heard from the Conservative leader.
And are you prepared to elect the same Liberal MPs, the same Liberal ministers, the same Liberal staffers all over again for a fourth term? Mr. Carney, Justin Trudeau's staffers are actually here with you at this debate in Montreal, writing the talking points that you are regurgitating into the microphone. How can we possibly believe that you are any different than the previous 10 years of Liberal government?
25 seconds.
Okay, so we're all giggling a little bit because Yves-François Blanchet, ooh, painful, if you're wondering who that voice was. But what do you make of what we heard from Mr. Poilievre?
I thought he was very effective in trying to make that case and tying him before. And for Yves-François Blanchet, he did the same thing in the French debate the night before as well. Said it's the same ministers, same staff, same policies. So yeah, Poilievre really helped capitalize on that last night. I thought those were some very good exchanges, and that's certainly one of the Conservative goals was going into it, is really make that point that would stick. This isn't about change if you vote for the Liberals, and then switching that message back to affordability.
Okay, Jordan uses the word stick, but I'm kind of wondering whether or not you think it did stick on Mark Carney, if that's something that Liberals need to be worried about.
I actually think that was one of his more weaker points of the debate. I think that any time that he's talking about the past and talking about Justin Trudeau, he isn't talking about what Canadians are concerned about, and he's certainly not.
For Pierre Poilievre.
In terms of Pierre Poilievre, he's not talking about the future, and he's not talking about the challenges that we're facing. And so, I think that Mr. Poilievre had an okay showing last night, but that was actually one of the weakest parts of his debate, I think.
George?
I agree with Michele. I think that trying to go backwards, again, they're trying to run the campaign that they prepared for 2 years, but it's not the campaign they're in anymore. And I think there's lots of other ways to go after Mr. Carney. I think the truth is that what you're going to see more and more, at least in policies, and we've already started to see, is that Mr. Carney's more and more like to the right, like closer to the Conservatives than Justin Trudeau ever was. I just don't think people buy it.
Okay. Well, let's bring in Mr. Singh now, because that essentially was also the point that the NDP leader was trying to make last night. Take a listen to a bit of an exchange that we heard from Jagmeet Singh last night.
The problem is who have you served? You've served to benefit those at the very top. You jacked up the price of homes for people living in affordable homes as a strategic decision. You dodged taxes. And then your decisions as Prime Minister show you're not prioritizing people, but you're prioritizing big business, billionaires.
You're literally talking about hundreds of thousands, not jobs, but careers in the trade. And that's why we're investing in apprenticeships and mid-career.
But I think people are worried, Mr. Carney, if New Democrats aren't there to force Liberals to make sure they remember about people they will forget.
Okay, essentially making the point that you're making in terms of the survival of the NDP, because, you know, there is a bit of this existential threat with the results coming up in a week's time if the NDP do not get at least 11 seats in the House of Commons. So what do you make of what you heard from Mr. Singh last night?
Well, I think that's crucial. I think a couple things. One, the Liberals are going to do what the Liberals always do at the end of a campaign, is say that the only way to stop the Conservatives is to vote Liberal. And, you know, I think the message to people at home is if you have a New Democrat MP right now, that's a clear sign that that's how you beat Conservatives, is re-elect your MP. And there's a few other ridings where that's true as well. And I think that's a clear message. And the other part of it is also, don't forget, like, not all Liberals are Justin Trudeau. You know, Paul Martin was, and with due respect, but Paul Martin was the Prime Minister that got me to become a progressive. I saw what the damage that was done. We discussed why he did them, but through the massive cuts to healthcare, the massive cuts to transfers to the provinces. And, you know, what we've seen Mark Carney already talk about the need to balance the budget in 3 years, which is $43 billion in cuts. So I think we need New Democrats there to say, hopefully hold the balance of power to say, you want to cut things? You can't do that. Let's continue to help people, especially through these dangerous times with Donald Trump.
Do you see what you did, Michelle? Do you see what you did?
I could go back at that as the bond markets were coming after us, and we actually kept our AAA rating, and, you know, that's why we have healthcare today. But I'll focus back on Mr. Singh's, and I think that he was, you know, I empathize that he was in a difficult spot last night. He, you know, he has to get noticed, and so I think that forced him to be probably less polite than he otherwise is as a person in terms of interrupting and kind of, you know, chirping every so often. But they're fighting for the very existence, and so I get that. I'm not, and I think that it will be interesting because he had to balance, you know, going after the Conservatives. Because he so fulsomely disagrees with everything that they are about, with also trying to, you know, go after the Liberals a bit too. And so you could see that his strategy was very split, and I'm not sure how that kind of, how Canadians would be viewing that sitting at home if he succeeded in what he was trying to do.
Jordan?
I certainly think he was a lot chippier than you know he normally is, and that he perhaps needed to be. And I couldn't quite understand perhaps why he was going after Pierre Poilievre the whole time instead of focusing on Mark Carney, because that's where they need to take the votes from. To Michelle's point, I think it is just because of an ideological reason they're so fundamentally opposed. But yeah, no, I think Jagmeet Singh he's kind of just swinging for the fences here because he's likely has some regret. I mean, had he not been in a de facto coalition with the Liberals for a while, supplying confidence, whatever we want to call it, he'd probably be sitting as opposition leader right now with a caucus of 60 or 70 people. But
you can call it what it was, or we can call it some other name if you want.
Yeah, sure. yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
There'll be two things really quickly on that. Is that first, people are looking, either they're with Pierre Poilievre or they're against. And one of the things that needs to happen is that Jagmeet Singh needs to demonstrate that he can fight Pierre Poilievre and we can defeat Conservatives. And the fact is, through a lot of British Columbia, Northern Ontario, Southwestern Ontario, and some other places, it is New Democrats who are going head-to-head with the blue team. So that's important there. And I think just to defend it, because this other points out there a lot, it is true. And it's not like New Democrats are dumb. We saw it in the fall. I wasn't there, but I'm sure his staff around Jagmeet and Jagmeet saw that if they'd pulled the government down in September, sure, they could have gotten 50, 60, 80 seats. But it would have been a majority Conservative government. We wouldn't have pharmacare, we wouldn't have dental care, and so the decision was, let's move forward and fight to get these programs to people's hands and then see where it lands. And now they're reaping what they sowed. But that's the reality of what happened in the fall.
It is, but I mean, they could have been rebuilding and focusing on actually fighting to form the next government instead of just fighting to get a handful of seats. And that's
and I'm sorry to interrupt. I only got a couple of minutes. But a quick go around though. How do the individual parties use what happened in the debates to their advantage in this last week of campaigning, or are the debates done and forget about it, you move on? Michelle? I
think parties will be looking through everything, taking what clips that they can, kind of splicing them out and using them in terms of advertising, probably on social media and that. You know, there was no big moment of the whole thing. So most Canadians will forget about it. You know, some of it might be pushed to their feeds in a certain way, depending on who you are, where you live, and where you might kind of think to fall in the election campaign. But I think it's going to be mostly forgotten, both the English and French, and so. But it was done, and some issues got talked about.
Yeah, and in your case, he survived. So,
Jordan. No, look, I think Pierre had a great night. I think coming into it, he was able to take some of those sharper edges off that perhaps he was getting some criticism for in some corners, or maybe why Canadians weren't quite warming up to him. I think, you know, in his closing statement, in his part about the regret of the campaign, not being able to get out and see as many people as possible, I think all leaders did quite well there. I think Pierre really sort of shone through with some emotion on that one. But look, it's advanced polls are kicking off today. This debate, I think, in all parties would have served to really ramp up and rally the ground troops. And now it's gone to the ground game, and we'll see who has the best one. I think Conservatives are quite organized, quite well funded, tons of volunteers here, and we're seeing lots of long polling lines right now. So that's good for democracy.
Okay, George, last word to you.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long weekend. However, people are celebrating. Folks are coming together with time off from work. So I think now is a good time for people to those people who did see the debates will talk to their family. I think for sure in the days that we are now in, people are going to be pulling clips. And so we'll all have our favorite highlights that we'll push through and try to make it look like there was a big moment. I don't think there really was one, but I think that, you know, each of the leaders had a clear message they want to put through. And so for Jagmeet, that'll be, look, it's going to be a Liberal government. Let's do what we can to make sure it's a minority and have as many New Democrats there as possible to keep them honest. Okay. George, Michele, Jordan, thank you very much. Thanks for coming in on a holiday Friday.
Well, thank you. Thanks.
Okay, now about 40 minutes into the debate last night, as it was happening, word was released that the post-debate interviews with the party leaders were being canceled. The debate commission saying it could not guarantee a proper environment for the event, a fallout of the commission's decision to grant members of Rebel Media accreditation to the debates. Take a listen to the political reaction. We heard about that today.
These are organizations that spread misinformation, so I'm not going to answer questions from groups that spread misinformation. In terms of the commission, I'm not really focused on that right now. I'm focused on this campaign. Maybe we can take a harder look at that after the election.
Useless, harmful, and expensive thing which prevented me from speaking French to the reporters yesterday after the debate, having us all look like fools with a few activists, extreme right activist, far right, you say.
I would suggest that probably the best thing is a period of reflection, and then the Parliament, reflects and has some, can feedback or a process to feedback on how things can be improved.
Well, let's talk about the leaders' debate and the debate commission. Robert Fife is the Ottawa bureau chief for the Globe and Mail. Tonda MacCharles, the Ottawa bureau chief for the Toronto Star, and Joël-Denis Bellavance, the Ottawa bureau chief for La Presse. Hello to all of you.
Hey. Hi, Michael.
So listen, when the news of the scrums being canceled was starting to filter through, I was live on air. We were covering the debate here on CPAC. It was probably about 35 minutes into the debate itself. But you were there, Tonda. What was actually happening? Because I think there's still a question mark as to what led to this.
On the night of the French debate, the microphones were stacked by several of these outlets. On the night of the English debate, given the way that had unfolded, there was a lot of frustration in the media room, and I was heads down sort of writing just as it was just about to start within 20 minutes, and I heard noise, and one of the Ottawa-based press gallery reporters and one of the representatives, Cian Bexley, of one of those groups, one of those media outlets, started chirping at each other. And it evolved from there. Ezra Levant, the founder of Rebel News and who, runs one of these organizations that was circulating the truck that had political advertising on it, got involved as well. Now, he kept his tone down, but it got heated. And then next we heard the Debates Commission Executive Director, Michel Cormier, called Ezra out. And there he was confronted by Mr. Cormier because earlier in the day, unbeknownst to us who were in the room, Mr. Levant had tried to confront some of the journalists from CBC on their set, and that's not on. Anyway.
Which look, journalists don't do.
Journalists don't interrupt other people doing stuff like that. But we do self-police on the Hill. Like in a scrum, things get rough and tumble. We check each other if someone is really out of line and ruining the line of questioning or the answers. Anyway, as many people saw last night, the groups that were there representing these right-wing outlets retained their accreditation to stay in the room, but the Debates Commission pulled the scrums out, saying they couldn't provide a proper environment, and then sort of inexplicably refused to explain that decision and walked away from reporters' questions about why there would not be an opportunity to question the federal leaders. There was a suggestion that there was some security concern. That's not clear. I think it was just a disruption concern. And look, that whole 2 evenings of debates from start to finish, in the time leading up to them and now the fallout, was a disaster. Public relations disaster, a substantive electoral democracy disaster. And the Debates Commission has a lot to answer for. They made incoherent decisions on the admission or and then exclusion of the Greens, on the scheduling of the debate. The facilities were a mess. We weren't allowed to go to the bathroom in the Radio Canada building. We were put out to a trailer. You know, it was just so ridiculous on so many levels.
Well, you know, and to that, you know, it was the commission that essentially gave accreditation to Rebel Media. What do you make of that decision, Bob?
Well, look, I have a real problem with giving accreditation to organizations that are not news organizations. They say they are, but they're not. This is a partisan, right-wing, people who agitate. They play to people's biases, they try to feed off of that, and then they fundraise off it. This has been an enormous success for them. They've had 2 days of everybody talking about them, and they're also, by the way, they support Mr. Poilievre, the Conservative Party. That guy is always letting Rebel and these other extreme right-wing groups ask questions. Well, we can ask questions, and they support him. But they ruined the night for Mr. Poilievre. He had a pretty good night at the debates. But what was the coverage after? And what is the coverage now? Are we talking about the debates? No, we're talking about what these people did. And that happened all last night on all the television channels. So Mr. Poilievre has walked away without a win because of the idiots who support him, and he tries to claim that they're a news organization. They are not real journalists.
Joël-Denis?
No, they're phony people, phony journalists. They make me mad when we discuss this because it is profoundly offensive to my profession as reporters. In Quebec, we have a code de déontologie, if you can help me translate that.
It's like an ethics code.
Yeah, and we adhere to that. They adhere to nothing of that. I mean, they pretend to be journalists. They're not journalists, and they are there to disrupt events that are bound to support our democratic process. It's offensive what they did, and Quebecers did not know those people. And when they saw what they did, they were offended very much. And so if they try to go back there again and try to do that kind of stuff, maybe it's not going to be the Montreal police that will go chasing them. It's going to be the Sûreté du Québec. And they don't fool around with that kind of people.
Okay, well, let's move away from Rebel, though, and talk about the commission, though, because, again, ultimately, though, this was the result of decisions made by the Debate Commission. The Debate Commission itself, a relatively new body that's publicly funded. What do you think about the precedent that's been set here and what it says about the future of this commission, Tonda?
Look, there was a lack of professionalism in the conduct of how that whole debate went off, for starters. But it's not the first time. The Debates Commission has organized the last 2 electoral debates and has confronted the question of Rebel before, and it ended up going to a federal court, and the federal court judge, whom what do they know about who is or isn't a journalist, said, oh, well, you know, it's free speech and they should be accredited, whatever. And then so the Debate Commission felt a bit hamstrung in trying to decide this, and then this week, Rebel's owner, Ezra Levant, publicly revealed that he was sending them threatening letters every day, threatening a lawsuit if they didn't let his 5 media outlets into the room. And so the Debates Commission has stumbled all along the way. Honestly, I think that the best thing, although I know the politicians are also, other than Mr. Blanchette, retaining their counsel on what should be done about it, but why not put it back? If everybody's all for free speech and free media, put it back to the media to organize the debate that they want to put on, a show, a program, whatever. As we did in 2015, there were five series of debates put on by all kinds of organizations. If Rebel News wants to hold a town hall, fill your boots, invite the politicians to go there. Those who want to go speak to that crowd will go. And those who want to show up and, you know, like it or lump it, mainstream media, town halls or debates will show up, and Canadians can judge. But I mean, free the media ecosystem to do it professionally and properly, and cut the bureaucracy. I don't understand how this thing can survive.
Yeah, Bob, what do you say to that?
Oh, I'm 100% with Tonda on this. I think it's a government commission. A lot of these people on the commission have no experience whatsoever with journalism. You know, it worked really well when there was a consortium of television networks that got together, organized the debate. Journalists were picking the questions. And by the way, Steve Paquet was a great...
And that still is the case, right? They
they're very good.
out the work.
I don't mean to say that, but I'm just trying to give the sense is that this was organized without any involvement of the political parties other than requesting them to join. And the freedom of journalists to decide what is the best way of getting as many Canadians to watch as possible. So I think they just got to cancel this and go back to what worked before. And just the other thing is, and we need more debates. The Monk school used to do debates. The Globe and Mail has done debates, probably the Toronto Star. We need to get more debates. 2 debates, really?
Let's not leave anybody with the understanding that the Debates Commission, the government body, determines the question or the format of the show. They actually subcontract out the production of the debate to a media organization, in this case Radio-Canada. And the journalists did decide, you know, the broadcasting group and whoever was taking that, worked with the moderators to form the questions and the format. But the problem is, like, overseeing it and giving the access and approving all the other logistical mess. I mean, some of the media organizations were then charged $2,200 to be out on a little wooden riser outside in the freezing cold and snow to actually talk about this democratic exercise.
No access to bathrooms.
Sorry.
Quickly, I want to say that as the 2 debates, the content of the 2 debates were successful. And that's because of Patrice Roy, the one who presided over the French debate, and Steve Paquet, who's, like, to me, a professional in terms of managing a debate. So,
the debates were good.
Yeah, the debates were great, but the commission had nothing to do with the content. The content was produced by professional journalists like Patrice Roy and Steve Paquet. So that just shows you that the commission was, you know, had nothing to do with the success of the debate, but everything to do with the collapse of everything around it.
And they had one job. They had 4 years to do this job, organize it professionally.
Okay. Well, I think very much as suggested by the political leaders, there will be a deep think after this election as to the way to go forward when it comes to the commission and how to organize debates. But Bob, Tonda, JD, thank you for this. Appreciate it. And happy Easter if you're celebrating.
Thank you. Thank you. You too.
And happy Easter and happy Passover to those who do celebrate. But that is our program for this Friday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back next week. Until then, have a great and safe weekend. We'll see you soon.